welcome back, or hello, I guess. Probably should start with that. It's been a while since I did a normal video, obviously. I'm still doing the TikToks stuff. I want to say sorry for not uploading the wrap-ups before now, but the main reason I didn't is because if you watched my summer wrap-up of last year, you'll know about this already, but I experience every year the summer slump, which is basically where I have zero motivation for reading the entirety of the summer. From like the middle of June to like the middle of August, I have no motivation to read, or in the case when it comes to the channel, do book content, which, you know, considering the fact that I want the majority of my content to be book-based, or that's the only stuff that I'm necessarily doing at the moment, not necessarily a great thing. But obviously TikTok compilations have been going on as normal, and that should continue, but from now on, I think I will probably put a hiatus on every summer for book content. So I will be doing a summer wrap-up for just ever from this point onwards, unless I get to the point where I do just read normally in June, July, and August. Speaking of July, if you could tell from like the title, or I guess the thumbnail, obviously I haven't made it yet, so I'm not 100% sure what it looks like, but obviously I've put June and August. Reason being for that is I didn't read anything in July, which not that surprising considering last year I only read like 3 books in July. Anyway, I should get on with the books that I did actually read in June and August. In June, I only read 3 books. I want to say it's because I was focusing on exams. I had my English exams in June, obviously, because if you're in the UK, that's when you do your GCSEs, and I resitting my English GCSE again. I did fail it again, but I did get a better grade than I did before, so this year I will be resitting it again, unless we get a remark and they can get me like a better grade, obviously. But frankly, I don't know why I didn't read as much in June. It just kind of happens, which is it happens sometimes. That's normal and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but no, what are you gonna do? But anyway, so the first book I read in June was Ever After High, Once Upon a Time, a storybook collection by Shannon Hale, which obviously is a short story collection, and well, the first story collection from characters in the Ever After High series, which was a doll line which launched in 2013 and had a cartoon on the internet, and I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but it was on Netflix briefly, which is about the storybook characters' children, not to be confused with Descendants. Descendants is most definitely a copy of this. This has nothing to do with Disney, and it is actually created by the same people who made Monster High. I read this mainly because years ago I read the last book in this series, which is supposed to act as sort of the finale of Ever After High and cross it over with Gen 2 of Monster High, when it was supposed to originally get a movie that was supposed to cross over Gen 1 of Monster High and Gen 2, and obviously Ever After High together, but that was cancelled when Ever After High was cancelled, and Mattel lost its deal with Disney to make Disney Princess dolls, which is a brief overview of Ever After High as a series, I guess. But yeah, this is a story collection from multiple characters, POVs, of right before the start of the series, which is Legacy Day, which is when they are supposed to sign away like their destinies to inherit their parents' story. So it is fundamentally a little different to Descendants. It is the Planet Gets You by Mattel. And it also features the first 2 chapters of the book, the Storybook of Legend from Apple and Raven's POV. This was fun, and it did show and I really enjoyed this because sometimes you just like simple books. I did really enjoy Ever After High as a concept, and I remember getting a little bit obsessed with it but never finishing like the actual series. And obviously I read the last book in this series, so I've never really been completely grounded in the world. And overall this was a 4 stars, and I did really enjoy it. The next book I read was Once Upon a Pet, another collection of stories in the Ever After High world, but this time by Suzanne Selfors. I'll put how you spell her name on the screen now, because obviously I've definitely mispronounced it. And this was cute and mainly focused on the main characters' pets and adventures they get into. Solid 3 stars, and it is definitely cute, but I definitely preferred Shannon Hale's book. And then the final book I read in June was the 10th volume of My Hero Academia, which I think I don't necessarily need to explain My Hero Academia because it's obviously a really big anime and has a huge fandom and has since I think 2016, but if you haven't heard of it somehow, basically in this world 80% of the population have these superpowers called quirks naturally, and it follows the main characters of Izuku, Midoriya, Bakugo, Katsuki, and their entire class of 1A as they're trying to become heroes. But Izuku was the part of the 20% of the population that wasn't born with a quirk, and the story goes on from here. Obviously I can't delve necessarily what was into this specific volume because it is the 10th in the series, so obviously massive spoilers, but this was a 4 stars and I did enjoy it. And that is the thing I read in June. I did read a lot of fan fiction in July. I can't remember the specifics of it. I think it was Phineas and Ferb related, because I did get fairly obsessed with Phineas and Ferb to the point where I now own Phineas and Ferb bed sheets, so there's that. So Phineas and Ferb gets a solid 5 stars, and I'm very annoyed that we're not getting any of the new. We only have the first 10 episodes on Disney Plus and not season 5 until 2026, which is very annoying. But anyway, generally in the last 4 months of the year, it goes by really fast anyway, so I guess necessarily can't complain. You might have noticed, for the people who are returning, that I failed to mention 2 books that I generally set out to read every single month of the year. But this I didn't read Tabanoff and Dapko, which is the books I started obviously with in August, was finally finishing them, because I did start rereading Tabanoff but just never finished it. I can't necessarily explain why, I just wasn't in the mood for it, I think. But yeah, obviously still 5 stars, and I'm not sure why I got so, I guess, stumped with them. The next book I read in August was finally continuing this series, was Five Nights at Freddy's Tales of the Peach Pecks, 7th book, Tiger Rock, which is a collection of 3 stories set in, like, I think this one is set in the universe, or at the very least it's a remix of like of the Five Nights at Freddy's games and like their story into it. And if from what I know, this is heavily based on, Secret of the Mimic, the newest game, is heavily based on this story. So there are three stories to each one of these books that are obviously based in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, and then all of the books together, which I think there's 8 total in this series. There is an overacting plot at the end of the book, which honestly, it's the main reason at this point that I'm reading all of this, to get the conclusion of the story. Generally, with the Five Nights at Freddy's book, they're not that good. I'm gonna warn you now. If you want an indie, I prefer, when it comes to indie horror book tie-ins, is the Bendy books, personally, because generally they're not they're not necessary to understand the world of Bendy, but over time the FNAF books seem to be like the thing you need to read to be able to understand them. And I think Hello Neighbor also had this issue, but I never read the Hello Neighbor books. So there's 3 stories in this book. Is Tiger Rock, The Monty Within, and Bleeding Heart. And obviously the overarching story at the end is about the Mimic and several teenagers, and I won't go into more detail than that, because it's technically speaking, I guess, it's an epilogue story of each book, and this is the 7th part of that book. So the first story, Tiger Rock, is about this kid who goes into a VR simulation, and which is set like 10-20 years into the future of what they think the pizzeria will look like in that time, and meets Tiger Rock and is then haunted by him for the rest of the story, which was, I guess, kind of nice. And I did bookmarks. So I did, obviously, what's the word? Tab. That's the word. I did tab something in the story, and this is about the main character Kai's one of his friends. He said, when he wasn't hanging out with Kai and Asher, Todd was always sprawled on his bed reading a book, his foot jittering the whole time. His room was so stuffed with books that there was barely enough room for his furniture. And honestly, that is a mood, and I understand Todd. Yes, I understand Todd completely. I also want to say the main character of this story is half Hawaiian, half white, and they have him wearing Hawaiian t-shirts, and well, I'm not an expert in Hawaiian culture by any means, so I can't say if he's an accurate representation of someone who's half white, half Hawaiian, but something tells me he's not. But obviously I'm a white English person, so I can't comment. But if you were a Hawaiian person and read this POV of Kai, how did you feel represented by him? Because I'm kind of curious how people feel about Kai. Obviously it's not necessarily important because he's probably not going to come up in a game, but yeah, who knows. And the second story, The Monty Within, is about Kane, who ends up getting sort of possessed by Monty, and who acts as his intrusive thoughts, which not fun. And then the third story is about Danny, who, to get his attention from his crush, steals something from the Mega Pizza Place, which results in a lot of body horror, I guess, and it's to do with tattoos. The way the characters talk about tattoos in this making me feel slightly uncomfortable, because there's not, because obviously Danny's best friend is, for some reason out of nowhere, seems like vastly against tattoos. The girl Danny likes tattoos, and to get her attention, it involves tattooing in some way, and obviously leads to the body horror. Well, his crush is kind of annoying, but the main thing that really annoyed me about this is the way that they talk about tattoos, as I've said, and it's just, there's nothing wrong with tattoos, and yet they seem to act like that's such a weird thing to want to tattoo, but it's not, obviously. But honestly, that just irked me the wrong way, and I know I'm rambling. And then obviously it's the final, like, well, I guess this is the penultimate part of the mimic overlooking story of the books. And I just wanted to read out, pardon me, read out this because I'm pretty sure that one of the main characters of this section, Lucia, definitely has ADHD, and I want to read out this paragraph? Yes, paragraph to like go with my points and as to why I think she has ADHD. So, whenever she thought about anything, her mind would take off. One thought was the first domino in a succession of thought dominoes. The beach would lead to the sea, which led to boats, which led to fishing, which led to dolphins, which led to dolphins getting caught in nets, etc. And that sounds like ADHD to me, and I asked my mum about it, read her the paragraph, and she also agrees, and I feel like I trust her opinion on the matter because she's pretty confident that she has ADHD. But anyway, the book was a 3.5 stars. And then the book I read after that, which I spent majority of the month reading, was And They Were Roommates by Paige Powers. And I want to point out that Paige used this book to propose, which is really sweet, and obviously, and is really cute. And obviously, this book is the titles come from that popular Vine. The Vine, if you don't know it, how you exist on the internet for that long without knowing what that Vine is. But yes. So this is about Charlie, who has just transferred into a boarding school after a year of being homeschooled. It is an all-boys school, and he is struggling in the school because he's hiding the fact that he's trans, and he's in on a scholarship in this boarding school that he's transferred into is like an all-boys school, and it's completely elite. Above all that, he's ended up roommating with his ex-boyfriend Jasper. Well, I mean ex-boyfriend, ex-summer fling, that's how they describe it. But to get out of being roommates with him, he ends up doing this deal where he'll end up writing secret love notes that'll be passed between the all boys academy, their sister academy, which is all girls school. So love notes, so that that basically they use to ask each other to this big dance they call the mixer at the end of November. And obviously it goes on from there. This was cute and involved a secret society, and I looked into Paige Powers' other book, the Borough Boyfriend Club, which is also about a club that has a romantic thing. So obviously Paige has a specific type of genre that they write, and I don't know if I'll read that at this point, but this was cute generally, but a bit stressful because obviously have Charlie having to hide this huge part of himself and having to deal with Jasper being a bit, I guess, oblivious, but in a way, in more ways than one. And it's rather challenging, and probably one of the reasons why it took so long for me to read the book. Yeah, overall this was a 4-star, and I did enjoy it, but I can't picture myself reading it again, so I will be unhauling it. And then the next book I read, which was mainly because my newest type of fixation is the original X-Men animated series from the 90s, which ran from 92 to 97, and then there's obviously the sequel series, which is a continuation, X-Men 97, which I haven't watched yet because I was supposed to watch it with my dad, but that's not happened yet, not sure why. But yeah, so what I read after that was X-Men, the manga remastered, which as well as X-Men, the manga remastered volume 1 and volume 2, so which is basically a retelling of the animated series from the 90s, from season the entirety of season 1 and the first episode of season 2, and I really hope that they continue this because this series, because obviously book 2 ended on the cliffhanger that the first episode of season 2 ended on, and I really enjoyed this because obviously I'm hyperfixating on the X-Men animated series currently, so obviously that's going to boost my enjoyment of it. And it was also really interesting to see that obviously this was originally published in Japanese, and it was interesting seeing how they've changed a couple of things. Like, for example, in the show, Jubilee is being fostered, but in this she's been adopted already, which I'm wondering about specifically. And in the show, Gambit calls Jubilee petite, which is French for small, if you're not aware, because and Gambit is from Louisiana. That's why he speaks some French. But in the book, he does still call her petite, but also calls her princess in the first one, which I'm wondering is how different languages would work in, because I'm wondering how they did that in the original Japanese text and how that would translate well. And like, did they call her small in Japanese when they do eventually call her petite in this, or did they use the French word or the English word? I don't know. Yeah, they have different like art style and author for every single chapter, which I find really interesting. And the book starts with a description of a brief overlook of all of the characters, which I find fun. And then just both of these were 5 stars because obviously I really enjoyed the series. And I just, brief spoiler warning, skip to the time on screen, but obviously this is spoilers for the 90s series as well, not just the book. Yeah. When Morph dies in the show, they don't actually show him, dying in... I mean, they do show him dying, but when he dies in, like, the first episode of the show, and he is obviously blasted by a Sentinel, which, if you don't know what a Sentinel is, it's a big robot that was designed specifically to hunt mutants, and that eventually kills them. And then in the series, he just gets shot, and you can see their shirt that's been opened, and then they fall. Obviously, they look unconscious, but it's not necessarily that gory. And I wanted to show here is the same scene in scene that's been redrawn, obviously, and look how much more dramatic it is in comparison. Not only that, when they get to the point where they flash back to that point, you can see Morph did a lot more because he tried to shapeshift into Wolverine, and if you're not aware of Morph's powers, he can briefly take on some of the powers he shapes into. I'm not 100% of all the thing, so it's entirely possible. And he dies in Wolverine's arms, which obviously does happen in the thing, but he doesn't cradle him. Am I showing? And it's so much more dramatic, and my god, honestly, it's a bit more meaningful. And they got the fight scene where Wolverine kills the Sentinel for Beast and Morph, because Beast gets arrested because they had to leave him behind, and it's yeah, so much more dramatic. And yeah, and I think that's the end of the spoiler warning. I think, I don't know. Is there anything more I want to say? I guess I don't necessarily like the art style of the first chapter of this comic because of how the first chapter of volume 2, because I don't know, it seems it doesn't really work with the characters. I don't think, like, the way they draw Juggernaut, and he's like, honestly, it's uncomfortable, not necessarily because they make him look creepy or weird or whatever. It's just, I don't know, it feels too cartoonish, which is, I guess, is kind of stupid because obviously it's a manga, it's going to be cartoonish anyway, but I don't know, maybe I'm just nitpicking. But yeah, both of them 5 stars. Definitely enjoy, but again, the rating is definitely inflated because I'm hyperfixating at the moment. Now, the next book I read, continuing my Horrible Histories series read, was Horrible Histories England, which is a children's book about the history of England by Terry Derry. And this was a solid 3 stars. And then the final book I read in August was Horrible Histories York, which, if you're not aware, is where I'm from. So I rated this 4 stars because it's set in York. And please, if there are any other books you know that are set in York, please recommend them to me because I can never find them, and I do generally really appreciate them. But yeah, this is everything about York, from being invaded by the Romans all the way up to modern day, which when it was first published would have been 2005, sorry. Not sure how up to date it is, like modern day wise, but it is definitely a history book. Yeah. One of the things that it did really annoy me is that they've got these bits which are like maps, and a map of York and like historical buildings there, but it is in the middle of like one of the activities. If you're not aware, obviously one of the way this is marketed is because there'll be like choice answers or comic strips and like questions that you'll have to answer, and this is in the middle of one of those questions where you have to pick like A, B, or C for one of the options, and that's really annoying me, and I'm forever gonna think that these things should be at the front or the back of the book. That is everything I read in June and August. Now the last bit of the video is obviously the reading journal. So, see, I did the new books, so it's just Hepburn Onward, and updated the series tracker there and there. Then put in the books I read in June and August, obviously. And in June I did DNF these 2 books, which obviously The Only Light Left Burning is the sequel to That's All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown, and I did put on the series tracker that I DNF'd that book. And honestly, I wasn't feeling it, honestly, and I don't know really why I picked it, because I didn't really enjoy the first book that much either, and mainly because it was terrible when it came to show and tell. I would have show and not tell because there was a lot of telling but not enough showing. But anyway, obviously I have updated this series tracker as well, and I added this because I forgot to, and then I've put this one in because as far as I could tell there's at least 7 books in that series, which, yeah. And then I also added this one because I hope that there is another continuation of of this book because the second volume did end on a cliffhanger. And this is the setup I did for June. Obviously, I put these two in the wrong order by accident, so I had to quickly fix them if you can't tell. And then obviously all I read in July was fanfiction, so I put the AO3 symbol. And then this is the spread I did for August. I guess the word August didn't show up amazingly, but it's like where I want it to be. And then this is all of the books I read. And there it's my review for the first volume. I put I love how dramatic this is compared to the series, because it is very dramatic in comparison. And then finally I did this for September. I do intend to do a regular wrap up in September, but obviously no promises because reading has been a bit of a challenge, but oh well. But yes, that is everything that I read. And I do apologize for not updating you all sooner on why I didn't do a June wrap up or July one, but you know, here we are. I do at some point hope to get like other book videos out, but I don't know when or how that'll work. But yeah, at this point I'll probably just see you in September. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe and share and all the other YouTube stuff. And did I introduce myself? I don't think I did. I'm Milo. Goodbye.